If you thought the Los Angeles Rams had already made all the noise possible before training camp even started, you'd better stick around until the end. Today's topic could shape the entire course of the 2026 season. Expectations are sky-high for the team. They are counting on several young players to take major strides in their development. And one question is gaining momentum every day. Is one of the greatest players in Rams history actually thinking about a comeback? I'm about to tell you everything I've heard over the last few hours, but before we go on, make sure you've hit that like button. Only do it, though, if you believe the Rams are capable of reaching the Super Bowl this year. Type this: "Go Rams! Let's get to the Super Bowl!" Man, I'm really confident that's going to happen. As the Los Angeles Rams continue preparing for the start of training camp, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The team enters the 2026 season with high expectations, and the organization knows that success will depend on much more than just the roster's biggest names. Every NFL season brings surprises, with players emerging from unexpected places to become key contributors. The Rams are no exception. What makes this situation particularly interesting is the genuine belief that Los Angeles has a real shot at contending for the Super Bowl in 2026. Reaching that level, however, will require a complete roster, with contributions coming from every part of the team. The big question isn't whether there is talent on the roster. The real question is, which players will make the difference once the season kicks off? Some might become obvious stars, making spectacular plays week in and week out. Others might become vital pieces more quietly, without drawing as much attention. Right now, there are countless variables that could determine how the season unfolds. One area that deserves special attention is special teams. Ideally, the Rams would discover new leaders within this unit following the struggles of recent seasons. Progress in this area could have a significant impact throughout the season, and finding players who offer reliable contributions in this phase of the game could prove just as valuable as improvements on offense or defense. On the defensive side, there is an added element of intrigue. Several newcomers have already demonstrated their skills with previous teams, but now face a completely different challenge. Maintaining a high level of performance in Los Angeles is something that remains to be proven on the field. Consequently, close attention will be paid to how quickly these additions adapt, and whether they can sustain the caliber of play that made them attractive signings in the first place. Among these players are Trent McDuffie and Myles Garrett. Naturally, both carry expectations, but expectations alone do not win football games. The Rams will need both players to demonstrate a successful transition to this new environment and deliver the level of performance the organization expects to see. Training camp and the ensuing weeks will begin to provide those answers. On the offensive side of the football, the message appears much simpler. The Rams simply need to continue evolving. Development is not something that suddenly stops once a player reaches the NFL. Improvement remains necessary every season, and continuing that process may ultimately determine just how dangerous this offense can become during the 2026 campaign. Perhaps the most fascinating part of this entire story is the organization's continued belief in player development. There is a growing sense that General Manager Les Snead has developed an impressive ability to recognize the right moments to aggressively pursue proven talent, while also identifying when younger players should simply be given time to develop naturally. At first glance, that idea may sound somewhat contradictory when looking at the Rams' 2026 offseason. Snead once again emphasized winning now by completing 2 blockbuster trades. Those aggressive moves clearly reflected an organization focused on competing in the present. However, those same decisions also came with a significant cost. In order to complete those deals, the Rams gave up multiple valuable draft selections. That creates an interesting reality. Developing young players becomes much more difficult when there are fewer incoming draft picks joining the roster. Every organization depends on young talent arriving each year, and sacrificing future draft capital inevitably changes that process. Because of that, the Rams now appear to be placing even greater importance on players who are already inside the organization. Rather than waiting for future draft classes, They are counting on several current young players to take meaningful steps forward. 3 names stand out in particular. Wide receiver Konata Mumpfield is one of those players. The organization would clearly like to see him become one of the young contributors who elevates his game throughout training camp and into the regular season. While flashes of talent have already been visible, the next challenge is turning those moments into consistent production. Another player receiving attention is edge rusher Josiah Stewart. Like Mumpfield, Stewart has already shown encouraging signs of what he may eventually become. Now comes the difficult part. Training camp will offer him the opportunity to demonstrate that those flashes were only the beginning rather than isolated moments. The third player specifically mentioned is return specialist Xavier Smith. Considering the desire to strengthen special teams, his development becomes especially important. If he can continue building on the promise he has already displayed, his progress could significantly benefit an area that the Rams hope to improve moving forward. What connects all 3 players is that they have already shown potential. None of them are being discussed simply because of projections without evidence. Each has demonstrated encouraging flashes that suggest additional growth is possible. The next step is proving that those moments can become regular performances instead of occasional highlights. That process will not necessarily happen overnight. Development often requires patience, and the Rams appear willing to give these players the opportunity to continue growing. Training camp may provide the first real indication of whether those encouraging signs can develop into something much bigger over the course of the season. Watching young talent mature has always been one of the most rewarding parts of following a football team. Sometimes improvement comes quickly. Other times it happens gradually, almost unnoticed, until one day a player suddenly becomes an important part of the roster. The Rams appear to believe these 3 players are capable of making that kind of progression. Then there is the storyline that has captured perhaps the most attention as training camp approaches. One of the biggest unanswered questions surrounding the Rams remains whether Aaron Donald will return for the 2026 season. Speculation has intensified following the trade that brought edge rusher Myles Garrett to Los Angeles. According to reports, Donald is seriously considering coming out of retirement in order to play alongside Garrett. That possibility alone has generated enormous discussion. If Donald ultimately decides to return, there appears to be little doubt that the Rams would work through whatever financial and roster adjustments become necessary to make it happen. The organization would find a way to address those details if a return became reality. At the same time, there is recognition that Donald may no longer be exactly the same player he was before retirement. That does not necessarily diminish the value he could bring. Instead, the expectation is that Shula would identify a role that fits the player Donald is today, rather than asking him to be exactly who he once was. That distinction is important because every returning veteran faces changes over time. Success often comes from adapting responsibilities to match current strengths, and that appears to be the thinking behind how Donald could potentially fit if he decides to come back. For now, however, that decision remains one of the biggest questions surrounding the team as training camp gets closer. Until Donald makes his choice, speculation will likely continue because the possibility itself is significant enough to capture everyone's attention. When looking at the Rams as a whole, several different storylines are unfolding simultaneously. There are experienced players facing new expectations. There are young players attempting to transform flashes of talent into reliable production. There is a front office balancing aggressive moves designed to compete immediately, while trusting internal development to compensate for future draft capital that is no longer available. And there is an unanswered question involving Aaron Donald that could become one of the defining stories of the offseason. Every one of these situations will begin moving toward real answers once training camp gets underway. That is where promise starts becoming performance. It is where projections either gain momentum or disappear. It is also where the Rams will begin discovering whether the confidence they have placed in these young players is fully justified. For Rams fans, There is every reason to pay close attention over the coming weeks, because several important developments may unfold at the same time. The growth of Konata Mumpfield, Josiah Stewart, and Xavier Smith. The performances of Trent McDuffie and Myles Garrett in their new environment. The continued evolution of the offense, improvements on special teams, and the uncertainty surrounding Aaron Donald all combine to create one of the most fascinating storylines leading into the 2026 season. Now, I want to hear from you. Which part of this story do you think will have the biggest impact on the Rams this season? Are you most interested in seeing the young players develop? Are you focused on how the new additions perform? Or is Aaron Donald's possible return the storyline you simply can't stop thinking about? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I'd really like to know which development has you most excited as we get closer to training camp.